All right,
Go get
hang
him,
on.
Tiger.
You got to write me some. You got to write me some intros for the
Oh,
characters
sure. Yeah, okay. I can do that.
because I don't know that I'm gonna actually do that. But I'll do. I'll
You can
read them.
start with Dexter.
Dexter,
Yeah, from
the
Star
murderer.
Wars. No,
Oh, Dexter Jetster.
yeah.
All right, I'll see what he sounds like.
Okay. Well,
He's
we'll come up with some ideas.
he's supposed to sound like a greasy, like a diner owner in New
Yeah,
York or
but like a
something.
wise one, right?
Oh, is he wise? Yeah,
Yeah,
he knows
gives you
all
all
about
the hints.
genosis
Yeah,
or his
Camino, I think it
Camino.
is.
Camino. Yes, thank you. That was
You're
close.
welcome. I
All
am a
right, all
Star
right,
Wars god.
all right. Here we go. Here we go. Welcome to Open Betas podcast about the life of games and the game of life. My name is Wimfan, and with me, as always, is Regal.
Hello,
Yeah. Today, we're going to talk about some serious shit.
as
In the,
usual.
as usual, yeah, no different from before, really. We're going to talk about saving and loading, the most important thing that video game characters can do, and you as a player can do, that sets it apart from, real life, which sucks, where you do it once and you don't get another chance at it. Games let you restore or restart or do whatever you want as many times as you want.
Pause. Wait. Time out. Your thing isn't going up and neither is mine. Okay. Is your OBS recording the icons
It is,
correctly?
yes, yes. I
Okay.
see
All
him.
right.
I see him
We're good
bouncing
then.
around.
All right. Sorry.
Okay,
Time in.
no worries. Time in. Yeah, so we're going to talk about the ins and outs of all the different ways you save and load and have lives and have checkpoints in games, and how some games sort of included in the lore of how you're doing that. Like I don't know, BioShock has those little. It says that basically technology reclones you every time you die, kind of thing. Or is it simply we have no explanation for it at all? But let's jump into the basics about it. Oh, you have
Yeah.
patch notes.
I do. I also want to add one of the things. One of the things we also want to discuss is from a gameplay perspective. There is a lot of, I don't know if vitriol is the right word, but there's a lot of thought around like what is the quote unquote right way to play a game, and saving and
Yes.
loading circumvents that in some cases. Right? There's a lot of concepts in. In fact there's a term called save scumming, which sort of tells you all you need to know about what people think about it, or what some people think about it in certain
And-
contexts.
Yeah, and for the audience, that's just saving and reloading an event again and again and again until you get it right, or until the RNG goes your way. And yeah, the scumming implies that people are like, "Well, that's a shitty way to play. That's you're kind of cheating."
Right. You're cheating, and from some perspective, you can also be destroying your own quote unquote enjoyment of the game. Of course, that's purely subjective, right? But I think that's a common perception, and there's some truth to it. Even
Yeah, what
as
do you
a-
think? What do you think about that perception? What is your thought on that sort of thing?
I would say I think this goes back to all sorts of behaviors players engage in, which can be sort of destructive of their own fun, which is, I think, if you pay for the game, you can do whatever you want. But
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of things players do that if they would try not doing them, they would have more fun. And I'm no exception, right? I also get caught up in these sort of save reload loops where I just don't want bad things to happen.
yeah. I think I agree with your point of view. Like, yeah, it's play it however the fuck you want. It's like the whole
Right.
argument over tutorials or not tutorials, but like helper modes and stuff like that, or easy modes, I guess.
Yep.
And it's like, yeah, play it however you want. But yeah, you have a point. Like, it does really taking advantage of like a quick save system where you can save and load anywhere at any time. Really removes some of the stakes of things. Whereas if you were playing like a roguelike sort of designed around the idea that yes, you will die and it has some consequences, it's a totally different. It becomes a totally different game.
Yep. exactly. So I don't think it's inherently good or bad, but I do think there are definitely times, and we'll talk about this in this section, where it can really harm. I think pretty clearly your enjoyment of the game. Like you'll have less fun, even though you'll get a better outcome. Theoretically.
All right, cool. Are we?
All right.
Yeah, you wanna start us off with?
Yeah. So, well, these were originally patch notes for the AI episode, which we did with Vagar. Unfortunately, none of the AI parts exist anymore. They're lost in the nether.
Oops.
So the patch notes part won't make much sense, but I kind of circle back on some of the now secret, right now we had secret discussions with the CEO of Unknown Startup about AI, about some of the applications. And I think, we discussed a lot of things that weren't really practical, right? We're kind of just spitballing. Circling back to it, there's a couple of things that I think would be interesting for where AI currently is. One is, I think where it really has the current technology can have a strong application right now is for tutorials or learning or codecs, or if you've played Persona, like the navigator function.
The mapping function is that?
No, the how in Persona 4 it's Rise, Persona 3 it's I lost my Persona fan card. Sorry, I forget.
I didn't play 3. I only know 4 and 5.
But it's the person who like talks to you as you're navigating the dungeon.
Oh,
and,
sure.
you,
like the little,
gives you
little
weird, basically the commentator, right?
Yep.
I can't believe I forgot who it is in 3. It's the really quiet girl. Anyway, I think that AI could do that job pretty well. The way I would mix it is in a lot of older RPGs, there's like a button you press and like Navi or whoever will like pop up and like remind you what you need to do, and that's all hard coded. Right? So it's like we're in the main quest am I, and you press the button and like a little dialogue box with Navi where it pops up and says, hey, remember we need to go to the water temple to do whatever.
You gotta buy a new pair of pants.
And I think AI can do that quite well because that's obviously it's harder on console because you can't type, but the chatbot can do that. The chatbot can sort of have enough information about your game that it's trained on, like what it's supposed to do, and it can add to it over time with like Reddit. Well, I guess not Reddit anymore for now, but
wait, what?
With
something happened to
social
Reddit?
Media stuff. Yeah, Reddit's currently in a protest. It'll probably be back, but we'll see.
Okay, I'll have to look.
Now that's a tangent that we have to avoid.
Yeah, I'll go back to that later.
But AI, the chatbot part of AI can do that pretty well, and I think it can answer a player's questions about what they're supposed to be doing, or what something is, or how to do something really well. In the way it can sort of replace like asking a friend for things like that, or asking the internet about how to do certain things, right? Or looking it up. I think that's something that's useful, and that's actually pretty close to where the technology is. Doesn't require too much building.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, the other idea was there's this thing that happens in games where it's like, hey, where they give you a very vague task. It's something like, decorate this room, or this happens mostly in simulation games, I guess, where it's like in Animal Crossing you have like decorate this room, which ends up really just meaning like, hey, put 5 pieces of any furniture in this room.
Yeah, that's the actual requirement.
Right, but they don't tell you that. So it's not really until speedrunners show up that they're like, hey, I'm just going to put 5 chairs in a line along the wall, and the room is not decorated. So when you have, and the reason there aren't more of them is that they're sort of annoying to code, right? If you actually want to have a check for whether a player succeeds in something like this, something like decorate the room, or like, are you geared enough by some standard that's not just a number, or like, have you developed your city enough to a certain level? It's actually kind of annoying to code every possible variation that really counts, right? Like if you want to exclude, just put 5 chairs in the corner, you have to come up with a lot of conditions as the developer, and that's really annoying. That's something AI can do as well, except this is worth thinking about, just because it might not be fun. It might be the opposite of what we play games for, even though it's more realistic. So if you imagine,
which is not what we play games for.
well,
Some usually.
maybe
not to
it
be
depends on the
realistic.
context, right?
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So, the AI can do a very good job. It's very good at classification, right? So, it can look at a room that you've built and be like, oh, well, this is, based on my internal algorithms, this is quote unquote decorated. Like, I've been trained on like 10,000 decorated rooms, and this is pretty close to them. And 5 chairs in a with only 5 pieces of furniture, but 5 chairs in the wall, definitely not. So the downside of so that's cool. It's like, oh, now these conditions are more realistic. The problem is, if you fail at the condition, you can't really find out why, right? You end up
unless you can't just have that as part of what the AI does, give you a different answer for like, this is too boring, or
you can try. The thing is, for this
that's like
context,
a hard coding thing.
yeah, you might be able to do that. But yeah, one of the core problems with AI, that in my opinion needs to be addressed more, is how completely impossible to debug it is.
Because of the sheer amount of possibilities.
Yeah, the amount of data and the complexity. In fact, the modern AI systems don't have a single model. They have like neural networks work by having like a bunch of individual decisions all linked together, like many of them. So it's not really like, hey, here's a formula, and then we add all these numbers and it comes up with yes or no. It's more like, hey, we have like 20,000 formulas chained together, and it comes out with an answer, but we don't really know why it said yes or no.
I see.
For a simple application, maybe.
I'm gonna insist we move on a little bit.
Okay, let's do it. We'll skip.
You can mention the last one if you want.
No, it's fine. The last one is actually the least interesting. So.
Okay.
There we go.
So all you out there, once you listen to that episode we don't put out, just make these corrections in your head. These are additional additions to the list we discussed.
There you go.
All right. So saving and loading. You wanna kick off the ubiquitous feature bit?
Sure. It is a ubiquitous feature. It's something that we take for granted in certain ways, right? It's I guess you might know this, but it's existed almost as long as games that you can't finish in one sitting have existed. Right?
Yeah, and I mean it also yes, and there were also tech limitations, like before you could have saved games on a cartridge or whatever, and before it was like affordable. There were a lot of games where it's just like you had no choice but to finish it within a certain, in one sitting. Like you can't come back to it. And
actually, passwords. Sorry,
I was going to say, passwords are another element that was in the early days not well implemented, and I'm not sure why. Because I think of the first one that I remember is the game Metroid had a password system. But it was so long. It was like 20 characters or more than that or something. And it was just like a real pain in the ass both to write down and to put in each time. And even then, sometimes the passwords wouldn't quite work exactly right because it's not really a saved game. It's just like all these possible states or whatever. A lot of those early games like, Atari, Nintendo, first Nintendo, still we're sort of working off of the arcade mentality a little bit too, of like games designed around taking your quarters. So you have like limited lives and they go pretty fast. The whole limited lives on console still sort of was a kind of a carryover from that, although still we have that sometimes, but usually like a number, you have 3 lives to beat the game or whatever is just not what you see anymore, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, this is kind of as we are going to discuss, this is sort of a key difference between real life and games is being able to do this and it gives you sort of a psychological, I don't know, confidence, safety in games.
Yeah, definitely. it sort of exemplifies what games, like what makes games sort of interesting and fun, right? It's sort of the reason why Grand Theft Auto is very fun and also doesn't lead to you doing Grand Theft Auto things in real life. Right?
Right.
It's this idea that like you're free in a game to try to push the boundaries and do whatever you want because there are no consequences. And with
Yeah.
saving and loading, there's also no consequences in the game sometimes, right?
Yeah, and exactly. It's very there are no exactly, no consequences. You're not going to die, you're not going to get arrested as you would immediately in real life.
Well, yeah.
Well-
If legislation keeps going in the way it is, maybe you will eventually. But for now, you're safe. So let's talk about the way the modern implementations are. The different ways that saves are sort of designed. So to sort of try to get across the problem we mentioned before of players, quote unquote, abusing, although I don't really like that word, them to do things.
Let's just say molesting.
Yeah, sure, molesting them.
Okay.
So the most simple version is the save anytime, right? Now this is actually usually not literally save anytime. So for example, in an RPG where you can actually save anytime on the world map, you can't save during battle, right?
Right. You can't be like, I didn't like how that hit went down or whatever.
Right. And that in and of itself is actually a pretty interesting. I think it's actually obviously part of it is technical, but I think it is a conscious design choice because, even if you can save right before the battle, you can still design as the designer, right? You can still make a long, challenging battle. And if you can't save during the battle, you at least sort of force the player to play it fairly, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Right?
And make
Play the
actual
whole-
decisions rather than just sort of like flailing.
And similarly, or like reloading for a crit and a miss every turn.
Right.
And similarly, there's Bethesda games I think are the most infamous for this, but there's sometimes a quick save system in
Yep.
action or like 3D real-time games, right?
A lot,
turn-based,
yeah.
in other words. Yeah.
mean-
But those, at least in Bethesda, they don't allow you to save while you're in combat for, I would imagine, very much the same reason, right?
Yes, that makes sense. And I'm thinking of also like constant combat or shooter games like Call of Duty games. Usually just don't let you save load. They're checkpoint based, and they're the checkpoints only pop up when there's no one shooting. When you're between battles, so you can't just abuse that. But I think of games like XCOM. Did you play XCOM?
I tried to play XCOM 2 a little bit, but it was too realistic for me.
To 3D or like
No,
it's only
no,
first person shit that's bad for you, right?
yeah. What I mean is like the combat was too realistic. I don't want like.
You mean permadeath?
Well, that too. Although I don't mind permadeath that much, but I just mean like there was too much like aim and like gun range and sight and stuff. I'm just like,
So you don't like gun tactical stuff, maybe?
yeah, not really.
Interesting.
I
like it.
I like some of it, but
I liked it a lot, but I did the problem that we're talking about. I reloaded after every fucking shot, or if one of my guys got hit hard, I'm like, well, just reload that.
Yep.
And the higher levels don't let you do that. The way it's intended to be played is, when they die, and you got to deal with it. But I can't. I'm like, I just can't. I can't deal with that. It's not fun for me. Yeah. Anyway.
we'll talk about the psychological effects. One thing that I just thought
All the
of.
dudes I'm working on, they die. All the
Yeah, it's
experience
true.
points. What about all the
Permadeath?
XP?
Well, yeah, that's also true. But permadeath is sort of a separate topic in and of itself, right? Especially when it doesn't just end the game. When it's like sort of.
Yeah, like side characters. Maybe it's not
Yeah.
the protagonist that dies, but all your other friends can die. Then it continues on to a sad ending. Great.
Yep. One other reason you might not be able to save in a fight is that they don't want you to get soft locked, essentially.
Like some sort of state where it's just fucked up.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean like where you get killed again and again?
Yeah, right. Because if the fight, if it's a fight that results in game over, if you can save during it, then you can never, then you sort of just cannot progress the game. If you
Yeah,
can't
you're
win the fight.
locked. It's like a death loop. Yeah, I remember you can do that, and I did that in shooters all the time. Like I remember, like the original Half-Life, I had accidental quick saves where I was just a second away from getting hit by a rocket or whatever.
And also similarly in action games, you can sort of quick save in a state where you're about to die, right? Like if you're falling down
Yeah,
and you quick save and you load, you're still going to be falling down. Although specifically in Bethesda games, that you like negate fall damage if you quick save at a certain point, right? So,
I love that.
yeah, that sure is good.
That's on brand for them.
But yeah, we already mentioned the second version, which is a checkpoint style, right? So instead of being able to save any time, or in the vast majority of cases, like anywhere on the world map, a lot of games only allow you to save at certain, usually safe spots or story parts. A very similar implementation is like you can only save after every level, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
you have to play the whole level, but afterwards you can save.
Yeah, like you if you get to a certain point, you can bank all your progress, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
So-
and that eliminates a lot of those edge cases, like bug wise, right? Like
Yeah.
save and load, all the different states you got to do. If you can do it anywhere, things might just not work sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas checkpoint makes it just more controllable.
However, there's a downside, right? The main downside is sort of the reason why saving exists in the first place. Like, if you ignore all the things you can do with saving, theoretically, the point of saving is that the player doesn't lose progress, right?
Yeah. I mean, at the top level, it's like I want to put down this game and go do anything else and come back to it, right?
Or my power went out and
Yeah.
I just spent 3 hours on this
Yeah,
game.
my
I
dog
would like to have
unplugged
those
it.
3 hours back. Yeah.
My little brother saved over my game.
So
wait, that's
out of well, yeah, that would still have it. At a very, very basic level, the question that needs to be asked is, why would you make a checkpoint when instead of having the player save anywhere? Because the player could just, why wouldn't the player, if they wanted checkpoints, why wouldn't you just let them choose to save at where your checkpoints would normally be? Why force them to do that? Obviously, that's a very sort of naive idea.
Fools.
Right, yes, fools. But I think and that's honestly, that's sort of a point of view that's often echoed on the internet about games, right?
Like, just let me save.
Yeah, whenever the ability to do something is ever taken away in a game, it's like, why don't you just give people the choice whether they want to do it or not?
And so that usually comes down to the designer thinks they're
Yeah.
developing a better experience if these limitations are placed on you, right?
Yeah, exactly. If you take it to the extreme, it's like, why don't games just allow debug cheats? The players that don't want to use them don't have to use them.
Right, like having just God mode available on the options screen, sort of thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very fundamental psychological thing, right? Like the game is not really a tool. It's like supposed to be a guided experience, right? It's
Wait, what do you mean?
Yeah. So I think a lot of people think of games as like a tool or a toy that they can sort of mold and break and do whatever they want with. But I think that's actually not the experience that most designers and most players want when they buy a game and boot it up.
They
I
want to
think
go
what
through the designed experience.
Yeah, exactly. They want to
that's
go
what I
through
want,
the guided experience. Yeah. A way I would compare it is like when you go on a cruise, right, or a vacation tour, you get on the boat and the director's like, okay, here's the whole world. Tell me where you want to go. And you're like, what? I don't know, man. I'm just here to have fun. Like, aren't you supposed to be telling me where I'm supposed to go? And then for lunch, it's like, hey, look at all the ingredients. Tell me what you want me to make. It's like, I mean, and then you can't do this
I'm
for
here to
every
go on a ride,
decision.
baby. You gotta
Yeah,
take me on the
exactly.
ride.
And I think it's important to sort of think about games like that most of the time. There are some games that are exceptions. Like the more sandboxy the game is supposed to be, the more control people want.
Yeah, designers will give you a nice, but
Yeah,
they'll define that sandbox and
yeah,
for the
exactly,
to give you the best decisions to make rather than
exactly.
I don't know. I can't think of any shitty sandbox games, but some older ones just had so many options and so many
Hmm.
goals that you could go for that it could be hard to start kind of thing.
Yeah,
Whereas I'm
exactly.
playing the new Zelda, which has added like construction and sandbox elements to the
It's
game.
Minecraft in Zelda.
It's Minecraft in Zelda.
Fog
Much
crazy.
simpler than Minecraft, but yeah, you can pick up most things and stick them to other things and build shit, and then
Oh,
you
it's
can.
Fortnite.
It's yeah, sorry, it's Fortnite. You're right
Ah,
because
okay, there we go.
you can build like planes and boats and vehicles and shit like that, or little forts.
That's cool.
It is cool, but it's Nintendo, so it's a very guided experience. And every
Hmm.
time you learn a new concept or a new tool, they give you an option. They give you the opportunity to build it and use it in a real situation. And
Yep.
it's just there's not as much just totally open blue sky creation,
Yeah. And this
which
is
is
a
fine by me.
spectrum. Yeah, this is a spectrum, right? Like some players like me prefer more freedom. Like whenever I play a game that allows mods, I tend to use a lot of mods, right? I want to customize my experience. But a lot of players, I think maybe most players don't want that at all. They prefer the more guided experience. And they're really annoyed when they see a game that's like, actually, this game requires like 7 mods to be fun at least. So
Yeah,
no way to
right,
get
right,
into.
right. I Yeah, I'm kind of if I have the time and I love the game, I like to do the guided experience first and
Hmm.
then,
Yeah,
pile on the mods and pile on just the different ways I could
right,
play this thing.
right. But again, it's sort of changes based on the player, and as a designer, you sort of have to intentionally figure out which group you're targeting, and obviously Nintendo is targeting one group, right, as they always do. So I think it's just good that the spectrum exists, right? And as a consumer, you should realize where you are in the spectrum and try to find the games that fit your desires rather than complaining about the ones that don't.
Yeah,
Although
yeah,
you're free to complain. I mean, your people are allowed to complain.
yeah. You're free to complain, but I don't. You have you. Yeah, I mean, I my point of view is that sometimes gamers online talk about how like, well, this is our game too, and we should get blah blah blah. We get to you can't you're nothing without the players, and I'm like, okay, fine, but you're still playing someone else's, and I'm going to use this word again. You're still playing someone else's piece of art. Like you don't get to. Your decision is whether or not to buy this. That's what you get to decide. You don't get to decide if this is going to be better because I don't know. You included some mode that I complained about. Anyway,
Yeah,
I mean, and
I
listen, you can improve your games based on feedback, but I'm not. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I just don't like the attitude that I want to do this, therefore I should be able to do this, therefore you guys are dumb for not including this, or you're
yeah, it's true. I think that gets messy when again I agree with you on all the high level points, right? But I do think your job is to decide whether you buy this game or not gets messy when it stops being a one-time purchase type of a game. When a game is an MMO or it's a gotcha game or it's another game that or it's like a MOBA like League of
yeah,
Legends, right?
something with ongoing
Yeah,
microtransactions.
well then or a subscription, right, or something of
Yep.
that nature.
Yep.
The player, it's not, you can't really just say to the player like, hey, you can just stop subscribing. I mean, they expect, and I think they rightly expect, that the money that they've given to you up to this point also has some value, right? Like
Like
even while they
I'm building up some value to just because I've given you so much over time.
right, that, and also I think there's a level where it's like, I paid, I spent, $200 making my character that's this particular class exactly the way I wanted it to be, right? With the expectation that I would get to play them for the next year. But now you reworked it, and I can I have my money back? Well, no, you can't have your money back.
Certainly not.
So would you, right? That's sort of the conundrum where it's sort of like if you buy a piece of technology and it's like, oh yeah, we're actually shutting down like half the services that you were going to use it for. It's like,
right.
well,
So you're saying like you don't, because of the changing nature of those kind of games, like a promise that was made to you may get basically broken,
right.
essentially.
And it's not really a promise, right? Obviously, in the TOS, they're going to say we reserve the right to do whatever we want. But I do think it's not
the marketing.
quite so clear-cut.
The marketing is going to make it seem otherwise, right? Like,
yeah,
it's like
exactly.
You're going to get this stuff forever. We're going to be very fair about your progress, all that shit, and this is what we're going to deliver. But the truth is just not that. It's just not true.
So I do think there comes in certain models, there is a time when the players really should be listened to more because, and we'll actually talk about this Pokemon Go, right? It's actually very similar to our next point of discussion.
You mean next episode?
Yeah, next episode. That's a little teaser.
All right. Well, I've tangented too much of a tangent here. We can get back to.
We're pretty.
One
close.
thing
So
I wanna,
checkpoints. Oh, great. Go ahead.
I want to bring up my pet peeve I have about checkpoint style. You may not have seen this because I don't know that they do it much on PC. The all unsaved data will be lost message. Do you know this one?
I do. I sure do.
For some reason, around the time of PS2, Xbox 360, or PS3, Xbox 360, no, it'll be whatever. Around that time. Around the message
PS360.
The message, if you quit now or something like that, all unsaved data will be lost, was like used as the thing you put in every single game with saves in it. For some reason, that phrasing. Yeah. And all it means is that the time from which you saved, which could be 1 second to the time which you quit, you're not saving that bit. But most of the time you see this message, you have properly saved the game. It just says this because it's like it's like an engineer.
It's called a speed bump, I believe, in
What's that?
UX.
Yes,
it's
bump? I would look at this and be like, well, wait a second, I just saved. So is this telling me I didn't save? And it's not, but every game does this, and I can't believe. I assume I'm not the only person that has had this problem.
Well, I think everyone has seen this message and sort of reacted in the same way, where it's like kind of annoying. But I do think this is one of those things where it just gets copy pasted.
Yep. And those things bother me when it's like this thing that everyone uses that no one changes, but it's probably like dictated by Microsoft and Sony is my guess. They're like, oh, you have to do this. Like this message has to be there so if people don't turn off their console or whatever. You don't think
maybe.
So? You just think people are copying it?
I do think people are just copying it. That's kind of what I expect.
It's so confusing to me. Ugh. Anyway.
Because I think at some point, most people that are experienced with it just ignore it.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, eventually
really
you ignore
about
it, sure. But it's
so I think what happens is like devs are kind of like they've never received the feedback. They're like, hey, this message is kind of annoying.
Yeah.
Everyone they talk to has just ignored it and sort of taken it for granted. And so they sort of just paste it into every new project they work on.
If I ever play a game with like someone who doesn't play a lot of games, like my wife, she's like, what the fuck? Like, wait, what? They're going to erase my data? And it's like, no, you just got to turn it off.
Yeah.
So I guess everyone just gets used to it. I don't know. Anyway, this is a very small point, so we can move on.
Okay, so back to checkpoints. So checkpoints, the point is that the player will have more fun in some way if you design the checkpoint system well. We'll talk about what I think is a really good example in Elden Ring or other Soul, or what's the company? I totally
From
blanked.
Software?
Oh, FromSoft, yeah. But the whole point of checkpoints is that you now can't save anywhere, so you can lose progress, right? So now there's like a design element to making sure that the checkpoint system is designed well so that you can't ever lose too much progress. Right.
Yeah, and with like save anywhere, you're kind of just leaving that up to the player. It's like,
Yeah.
hey, you handle this. Maybe we'll put an autosave in there, but
Yeah. And so one other way to think about it is we were mentioning how like even the save anywhere you can't save during combat, right? Checkpoints are sort of that, except the so there's a very small amount of combat in save anywhere games, and everyone else can save. Checkpoints are kind of reversing that. It's kind of saying, hey, the whole level is quote unquote combat, right? You have to experience you have to do the whole level in one shot, and then you can save after, right? And by the way, there is a third save anytime option, which is the save state, right? That comes with emulators.
oh yeah. When you're playing with a emulator or something that is, it circumvents any system that's in the game. Like you can just save state on top of it anytime.
Yep. And if you watched, as a kid, I used them a lot, right? I sort of just save stated my way through every game I played just because I could. It sort of highlights the problem that we were talking about with true save anywhere, right? Or save reloading kind of destroying your experience in the game.
Well, and similarly, when I was 10 years older than that, I used emulators when they came out as like, I'm going to go back and play all the Nintendo and Genesis games that I couldn't beat as a kid and play them with save states. I played all the Sonic games finally and played Ninja Gaiden and all those games that were like so hard.
So what else is there? So those are the two main ones, right? Save anytime and checkpoint. There's auto save only, which is a kind of a new paradigm. It's very
Autosave
similar.
only?
Yeah. So there is no manual saving. You can only so there. What this sort of gets around is players can no longer reload to go back in time after they make a decision, if that makes sense, right?
So
they
just
can
like, okay, go on.
they can literally only reload to go back to the last point they were playing the game. You can't reload to sort of I messed up, let me reload, because after you mess up it will autosave again.
Yep.
This is very similar to just sort of a multiplayer game where you're just always saving, right?
Yeah. MMOs, it's like you can't reverse any decisions, as I recall, usually, because that would be pretty unfair.
Right.
Are there offline games like that you can?
Yeah, there are. A lot of the challenge, I don't know if I can think one off the top of my head, but a lot of like the more challenge Iron Man style games have this system.
Yeah.
Like roguelikes. I think a lot of modern roguelikes have this system where either
Right. I guess it does have saves. It's just it's auto saving at certain, for every life or whatever.
Yeah. Okay, what about respawning in multiplayer?
Yeah, what about that? That's a whole other state of things. I mean, multiplayer, right? You have another layer of complexity of the sort of perception of fairness, right? Like, or the reality of fairness, because other people are playing the same thing. But respawning is still like the standard. Well, that's not totally true with battle royales, but it's kind of still the standard of shooters of multiplayer shooters, where I die, I'm going to be back in 5 seconds, or maybe even instantly back in spawn. So really, your decisions are you have to live with the death, but you can come right back. It's not like you have to
live with the death.
You got to live with the loss on the
That's a
on
good
the scoreboard.
album title name.
You got to live with the death. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Sounds
Swedish. Life in that case stops being sort of life and becomes like a resource, right, in the game.
Yeah. I mean, like it's so different from like an actual combat situation, right? Like where you have no fear exactly. Like you don't have to be like, maybe I shouldn't just run and throw a grenade at this guy directly. because I might get shot. And you're like, well,
Right.
if I get it though, I can get a double kill or whatever. So
Right.
yeah, it gives you a whole lot of freedom, and I think from the outside looking in, when non-gamers see all of these games and how violent they are, missing the idea of like, no, everyone dies and comes back. It's like a game of, it's like a squirt
It's a
guns
sport,
or some shit,
right?
Yeah. So,
Exactly.
yeah, that's all I wanted to say about that. I think.
Cool. I think we pretty much covered all the systems. A lot of what's remaining here
I
is
think so too.
another system of what's.
I want to
So
mention actually before we move on, I want to mention
Okay.
really quickly. I mean, I mentioned arcade games before were more about you have a certain amount of chances, and it's probably going to go fast because they want you to get another quarter in there. One notion of continuing or quote unquote loading your game is the insert coin screen where you
Right.
get the 10-second or even probably faster than that 10-second countdown, which puts the extreme pressure on you of, again, losing your progress, right? Like that's kind of what it's all about. And these games put, depending on your system, you're putting increasingly more pressure on that idea, right? So, the end.
Yeah. It's sort of it's sort of a temporary save that you have to buy, right? Which is kind of a
Yeah, exactly.
different
And
paradigm.
we can get into it later with the punishment of death, or like seeing your character beheaded or whatever.
right. Exactly.
A lot of those games had those kind of screens on the 10-second countdown, like Final Fight or Ninja Gaiden. Ninja Gaiden, you had your ninja like strapped to a table with a spinning saw blade lowering onto his chest
Unlucky.
while the numbers point down, and I'm like, oh my god!
Oh, that's kind of funny. I see.
And so
That's
when
a
it reaches
psychological
zero,
warfare.
yeah, when it reaches zero, it reaches him, and the screen goes red, and that's it. Brutal.
Interesting.
It's like a Final Fight. You're strapped to a chair, and there's a bomb on your lap, and you're like blowing on the fuse, trying to live. Anyway, yeah.
So what happens if you put the quarter in? Is there a cutscene or you
he
just
blows.
go
He
back?
blows out the candle. He blows out the
Oh, I
fuse.
see. Okay. What about in
the-
Ninja Gaiden?
I believe the saw blade just stops. I don't know if he like busts out or anything cool
Oh,
like
okay.
that. Might just
I
go
see.
back to the game fast.
I see. Well, anyway, we talked briefly about the perceptions around using the system as a player, right? Saving and reloading. One of the common ones is save scumming, which is, I think we described this already, which is just when you are at when something is about to happen and you just save and try it and then reload every time something that you don't like happens, right?
Yeah.
You're basically trying to go for the perfect.
Essentially,
And
a standard tool in a lot of speed running.
Yeah, exactly.
You agree, yes or no, that we're as a community, whether or not we allow that sort of thing, and whether or not it increases the fun or takes away.
And that's sort of the same idea, right? Like a speedrun community, while it's playing a game in a very different way, is still sort of designing. It's designing a meta game, essentially, right? Where we're still designing the rules so that we have the most fun, not for, in theory, not for any other particular reason.
Right.
And so in speedrunning, there's also this concept called it's sort of a meme, no SRL, or no save reload, which is like a tag applied to certain speedruns or certain categories.
Yes.
Right.
And we have
sort of
those
a
in
meme at this point.
adventure games too. Like you try to do it with no saves because it's a
Right.
totally different level of
Right.
skill and luck.
It's sort of the other level of individual level speedruns versus single game speedruns. Right? Sort of the same idea. And then one other thing is, one of the things that saving can sometimes cause a problem. Not that it's sort of the fault of saving, but there's a fundamental problem that can happen where if you are coming back to a game after you haven't played it for a long time, like 6 months, and you load your save, you can often be totally lost.
Yeah, what the fuck was I doing?
Yeah.
You gotta hit that Navi button.
Right, exactly. So there for a save, so a checkpoint game, for example, can sort of mitigate this better than the save anywhere game can. Right. But fundamentally, at some point, a lot of players, me included, just go back to creating a new game, starting a new game, because it's like, I don't remember anything that was happening.
Yep.
It's going to be just as fast if I just start over and go through the tutorial and the basics again.
Yeah, like I'm pretty sure I did that with The Witcher 3 not that long ago, where it's just
Right.
like, I don't know what the fuck is even happening, so
Right.
I'm going to go back.
Exactly.
And I still don't know what happened, but
Does anybody?
nah.
Did you know about the Gwent mod for The Witcher 3? I don't even know. I don't think it exists anymore, actually. It might be
What
defunct.
mod? What does it do?
It
Makes
replaces
cards
all the
nudes?
combat with Gwent.
Oh,
It turns
all the
into like a
combat.
Pokemon game. Yeah, all the combat.
Okay, that's funny. I like that. I am not the biggest card in-game guy,
Yeah.
but honestly, I did get hooked on Gwent a little bit, because I do enjoy the collecting part, when it's
Right.
like, oh yeah, everybody in the world will play you in a game and have a unique card or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I can be a
That's fun.
sucker for that if it's a good
I
enough game.
really think there's a big gap in the world for a single player card game that I think has not been filled very well.
Single player card game,
Yeah.
what's that tower one?
No, Slay the Spire? No, not that. Not a roguelike card game. Like a single player adventure RPG card game. Like the classic Yu-Gi-Oh games, or like Gwent, or like Final Fantasy with
Oh, there was a short-lived Magic game that did this. That Andrew Yip is a huge fan of. That was like a Pokemon style. You go into fights and play Magic.
there was a Magic game.
Yep.
I feel like I would know about this, but I definitely don't, which is
I don't know that it
shocking.
was well done, but he's still like, I want to make this game again. So you could talk about that stuff too.
Oh, dude, sign me up. We can do it. With the
But yeah,
power of
that's. I think you're probably right. I think you're right.
just because
People
I
love
love
those
like
cards.
it's so so much of the collectible card game is the collection part, but in a multiplayer context, this is the thing that gets monetized.
Yes. So
And
there's a
it's-
little less fun around it, I
Yeah,
guess.
exactly. And if you can just make it a single player game,
Uh-huh.
you first of all you can just make cards broken. You don't have to balance them.
Yeah, I
Well,
mean they're
you
loot.
do have a
They
little
can-
bit, but
they're your loot. They're your
Yeah.
equipment. You can do whatever you
and
want.
you can really make the collecting part fun, like you described. And I think there's a big gap in the world where this doesn't exist currently.
You search the broken corpses of your enemies and find cards.
Yeah, that's
Instead
normal.
of,
No, here's what
lives.
happens. You take so you're a taxidermist, right? So
I'm listening.
you kill your enemies
Mm-hmm.
physically. You kill them in real life, right? And then you take your knife and you
In
cut
real
them
life,
up.
yes.
Yeah, you cut them up,
Uh-huh.
and then you take their flesh and you turn it into a card. That's what you do.
Hold on, I'm just gonna clip this last 10 seconds. Okay. I like that. I'm a fan. I think that's great. I think the idea of like when you like harvest your monster enemies and make shit out of them, I like the idea of you harvesting people and making card combinations with them.
Of course, that's a totally normal thing. Of course.
Hey, if you can't do that in games, what's the point?
Anyway, back to saving.
Yes.
So obviously, the benefit of saving, the fundamental benefit is that your time is not wasted, right? If you
Yes,
need to
yes.
go, if you have a power outage, whatever, you come back and you can keep playing. And this sort of,
And like,
you know,
what's
this
the thing that
became-
makes you maddest in games, or what's the thing that makes
Yeah.
you throw a game out the window? It's like,
Yes.
I fucking spent 5 hours doing this, and it just I lost it all.
Yes. And it's really the same. It's the same in work too, right? Like if you're writing a doc on the airplane and then like something happens and you can't get it back for whatever reason, you're just like,
Well, frustrating thing growing up for me too was like, I'd be like the furthest I'd ever been in a Nintendo game, and then I got to go to school or whatever.
Yeah.
Fuck that. But I got to go to school, and I come back, and it's frozen. Nintendos can't be just left on that long usually. Like, shit breaks. So,
Right.
And I'd be like, no, oh, fuck.
yeah.
Yeah, I was a complete whiner about it.
And look at you now.
Yeah, not whiny at all.
So this sort of became necessary when, like, if you didn't have saving, actually, you just couldn't have games that can't be finished in one sitting, right?
Right.
It's kind of funny, but that's sort of necessary
It's
for
just
that to
so
exist.
it's totally necessary. It's like
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you need a bookmark for a long ass book,
That's true.
or even a short ass book, in my opinion.
Or even a article on the page.
Yeah, or a
Gotta have a
pamphlet.
bookmark for that.
I usually get a bookmark.
But there's also, but because of that necessity, a lot of things happen psychologically, right? So it
Hang on,
allows you to do a lot of
hang
things.
on. Are we skipping lore explanations? Are we doing that later?
Oh, you want to go back to it?
I want to talk about it. Yeah.
Okay, go for it.
Okay. All right. All right. So sometimes that mechanic, the save mechanic, is built into the lore of the game. So, like an example, it's a little different, I suppose, but like the Uncharted series or games where you're just the hero of the world, the action hero of the world who can get shot 10 times before they die. Sometimes there's like the explanation of why you get shot 10 times is like, well, you're not actually getting shot, you're getting these near misses because you're an action hero and you have like great luck. And so by the time the screen fills up totally with red, your luck has run out. It's not your health bar or whatever. I guess that's more about health than about saving. But then there's also the explanation of life and death through magic of the world or some godly interference. Like we talked about how JRPG or RPGs often have resurrection at churches. Like you go to church and a priest takes your ghost and turns him back into a person.
Which,
just
by
like
the way,
in
is
real
really
life.
funny. The thing
Yeah,
that
'cause it's,
really
like,
bothers me about
sinful,
those
right?
games, well, I mean, I guess, but no,
It's
the thing that really
necromancy.
bothers me is that in the story, characters die, and it's just like,
Yes, so name some characters will die in the story, and you can't take them to the church. It's
yeah,
just like
it's like,
no,
why not?
they blink out of existence or something. Yeah, Final Fantasy.
Final Fantasy is the big
Yeah, yeah.
one for
Final.
this.
Yeah, like why can't I take? Spoiler alert! Why can't I take Aerith to give her a Phoenix Down?
Yeah, exactly.
She's been through worse. Yeah, so there's life spells, Phoenix Downs, just like. Of course, and sometimes the lore explanation is, oh, they're knocked out. They're knocked out. They're unconscious. They're not dead. Phoenix Down wakes you up from KO, right?
Sure, it's
Yeah.
a smelling salt.
It's smelling salts. Although if you're knocked out for that long, you might have brain damage, so, it's not great. Then there's also the explanation that you're essentially an immortal being in the lore of the game. Like the Dark Souls example, you're what? You're the undead. You're the forever dying. And you're cursed to always, whenever you die, wake up at the nearest checkpoint, the nearest bonfire. Yep. That is your curse. Or Bioshock, I mentioned, have those tech booths that reconstitute you. In Hades, you're literally a god, right, or a demigod. Mm-hmm. And when you die, he's sort of you come out of the death pool or whatever, and your character says something snarky about how man, I almost had it that time. And then sometimes it's just like, yeah, you don't think about it. It has most of the time it has no explanation whatsoever.
Yeah. And then one other common explanation is sort of an extension of it was all just a dream trope that's often used in movies, right? Where it's like, in some ways you don't need to explain because, what is reality anyway? You're already in a game, right?
Yeah.
So what's the difference in, oh, well, this is, or it's another way to put it is very similar to, what do you call it? The multiverse idea, right? Mm-hmm. Well, like here's what would have happened if you had gone this way. But that didn't.
It's a sliding door scenario.
Yeah, but quote unquote, that didn't actually happen.
Right. Sometimes they even say that, if you are, it's bookmarked. What do they call that? A dramatic framing around like a flashback or a story, like the original Prince of Persia 3D game. When you fall in a hole and die, he's like, "Whoa, wait a second, that's not how it happened. Hang on." And you go back.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I do remember that. So there's definitely ways around it, but I think the last point you made is the most salient point, which is like just don't think about it too much, right?
Yeah.
You understand that it's a game and it's like a technical part of the game, and It's kind
Yeah,
of
it's
funny
just
to
part
think
of
about.
games. I
But
mean, it's the core difference. I think, again, I think it's like, it's the core thing that makes it a game versus something real.
right, right. Well, I would argue that
That and Mario
the core
mushrooms.
difference is that it's not real. But this is also
Totally,
important.
completely not real. Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
fine. Fine.
Okay.
Yeah, how can you kill all those people in GTA? Well, that's not real.
Well, you shoot them with guns. That part is actually pretty real. I mean, if you shoot them with guns in real life, they also die. It's kind of crazy how that
Yeah.
works.
And they drop floating
Yeah,
dollar
floating money
bills and
dollars.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That part less. Let's just say that once if you get busted in real life, you don't spawn at the police station and
Yeah, and
walk around.
they just let you out after
Yeah.
your killing spree.
Let's just say that won't happen in real life. Thankfully, not yet. Anyway, we'll see about how Tennessee goes, but.
Oh, okay, yeah. I don't know.
Okay,
what you're
so
talking about, but okay.
it provides psychological safety. Saving does.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It allows you. One of the things it really allows you to do is experiment. Like you can,
Yes.
right? You can just be like, hey, there's this boss here. Let me just save and go send it and see how it goes. Right. I don't need to plan. I don't need to look up the boss online and do calculations about whether I'm strong enough. Like, let me just send
Yeah.
it and see what
Or
happens.
literally, like, I want to see if there's something down this cliff, but
Yep.
you know, doesn't it'll maybe kill me if I'm wrong, but it
Yeah.
doesn't really matter.
And very, very similarly, you can amuse yourself through inting or intentionally feeding, as the kids say in League.
Inting.
Right.
I've never heard that.
So it's like this
Isn't
doesn't
feeding
really happen.
already intentional? Oh, it's not. I guess it's just
no.
you can be feeding if you suck.
You're just
Yes,
bad.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So so
Yeah, I mean,
inting is
still-
intentionally feeding. So this doesn't really happen in like RPGs, but you can do it in action games. In GTA, I sort of did this, right, where it's like you just you don't try to do the objective at all. You just get your gun and you just run around and kill as many people as possible, knowing that you're going to lose, but just for fun, right? And you don't actually lose anything for doing this.
Right, like the stars are going to add up and you're going to get killed in
Yeah,
this process.
exactly. And you're just gonna do it for fun, right? It's a way to amuse yourself without doing the objective of the game. And both of those things I think are very valid uses, right? It's much more fun to sort of try rather than to calculate, right? If you've played chess, this is sort of a common theme even among the highest level players. It's like, I don't want to try to predict what's going to happen. This looks fine. I'm just going to send it and like, I'll figure out what comes next when it comes.
Okay. Isn't that bad in chess? Don't you want to look ahead?
Yeah, it is bad. But even the strongest players still do this.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And in fact, like one of the appeals of speed chess, even to the strongest players, is that there's less of a burden for you to calculate everything.
And so you might experiment into something new that you
you just go off instinct, right? In general, it's just much more fun for a human to do things instinctively rather than cognitively.
Yeah,
For most things.
And when you get to be an expert at a game like that, you can just do that, like lean into your instincts. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's the same if you're not an expert, to be honest, too, right? Like if you're let's say you have a classic Zelda dungeon where there's branching paths, right? What is more fun, to just pick a path and go down it, or to go online, look up a map of the dungeon, look at everything that's down both these paths, map out the right path and go, right? Obviously, if you're a speedrunner, it's different, but for the vast majority of players, I think it's pretty clear that just going down a path and seeing what happens is the much more fun experience.
I'm exploring it. It's a fun exploration. Yeah.
And saving gives you the safety to do that, right? If you were hard committed, if you weren't able to save, a player might feel like they're obligated to make the best decision because they can't reverse the decision. This is real life.
I'm going to look for the clues that send me the right way rather
Yeah.
than I'm just going to try out everything.
Yeah. In real life, if you buy a house, you can't unbuy the house, right? So you have to make hopefully, although this is not usually the case, but hopefully you're just like, I need to spend like a fucking month of my life like looking at everything about this house and talking to the realtor and whatever, right?
Yeah, at least.
You don't want to do that in a game. And so being able to save and revert your decision later helps you get around that.
Yeah, that's some real life shit that nobody wants to do.
Exactly. And actually, you mentioned that people who are new to games are initially more afraid of dying in general, even if they can save.
Yes, it is. It is. I'm trying to think of other situations or other things in the world that even are like this, right? That
I think maybe just because I was on one of these recently, maybe like if you're tethered to a climbing wall, for example, but you're still afraid of falling. Maybe it's something like that.
Oh yeah, I mean, there is an irrational fear of heights and everything, but
Right.
yeah, I mean, it is kind of like that because you can retry as much as you want. You're not going to get hurt or anything, but you
Right.
still are like, this feels like a life and death situation to my body and my brain.
Yeah,
But
but
yeah,
it's
once
not,
you get used
right?
to it, any gamer is just like, death is nothing. It's an inconvenience at most once you're used to games. Oh,
Excuse me.
bless you.
Yeah, that's true. And in fact, once you get really used to it, people feel invincible, right? In fact, because there are no consequences, the way you approach the game changes. Things that are meant to be risky are no longer risky, and once you get used to it, you don't treat them as risky anymore. Right? You can just Rambo in to levels, knowing that you'll be fine because you can.
Yeah.
At worst, you can just reload.
Yeah, nothing really can go wrong.
Yeah. And that's where again we get this dichotomy where a designer might want to be like, okay, the point of this section is that it's supposed to be risky and you're supposed to be careful. So let's try to change saving in such a way to push you back in that direction a little bit. Okay, I want to skip this other section. What do you think?
The other?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just sort of random shit. We can
Okay.
move on to that.
All right.
Oh, but I want to hit the whole point about the invincibility. Yeah,
Okay.
I do wonder that if it misleads some people into thinking they're more capable than they are in real life and death situations. I mean, this is similar question to movies and TV, right? Like people don't really act like real war is happening in movies and TV. And
I think
go ahead.
I think the good thing about life is that we don't get to find out, which is a good thing. Like,
I mean, in most situations, yeah.
yeah, like most people, the vast majority of people go through life without being in a life or death situation, right? I've not been, I don't know about you, but I've never been particularly close to a life or death situation. Like,
I mean,
I've gotten the car I was in hit like mildly once or twice. I think that's as close as I've really come.
Yeah, me too.
Right. So we don't get to find out. So I think, to be honest, it's like,
But I mean,
it's
with
okay
the woke,
if people are delusional about it.
But I mean, like with the woke Antifa armies, I got to be able to. It could happen. They could be knocking on my door any day now, and I got to be ready to open fire.
Yeah, that's the opposite problem
Yeah.
of the people that are threatening you. But yeah,
Yeah, some people are. Some people want the threat in their life, so they make it
yes.
up. Yes.
I mean, those are the people with the guns that are actually the threat, right? So, anyway,
Yeah, let's go on.
okay, so let's talk about this idea of when saving gets in the way. We were talking about it a couple times already, right?
Gets in the way of the fun.
Gets in the way of the fun, yeah. And I think at the core, it is a psychological issue. I guess issue is strong. It's a psychological phenomenon, right? Where because the player has the opportunity to save scum, many players can't not do it,
Yep.
right? And so what the core of the problem of what happens is that people stop, quote unquote, playing the game, right? Saving and reloading is not playing the game. I think it's pretty clear that that's not like a fundamentally fun thing that anyone does. People are doing it to try to get the best outcome, of
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, when this is beyond the saving my progress thing,
Exactly.
it's more about I'm changing decisions, making things go a different way.
Yep. And like we mentioned in the previous examples, like saving your progress is not a core. It's not really the only benefit of saving, right? There's things like being free to experiment and like amusing yourself without consequences that are also fun, right? And there are good things that saving brings. But there's also, very similarly, if you take it too far, you have players that sort of save and reload before a random event until they get something good for like 20 minutes. And they like become miserable and unhappy, but they can't stop themselves.
Yeah, is this fun?
And by they, I mean me, right? Because I also do this sometimes.
And this has relation to some of the like skill tree discussions too, of like people who get stuck on the ability to go back and decide again and again and
Right.
again. You know.
Yes, very true. And the risk. So if you take it to the extreme, like if you play games like I did with save states as a kid, you can take it to the extreme where, in fact, it sort of teaches you a lot of the wrong lessons about the game, where you're no longer playing it quote unquote correctly or optimally or strategically. You become so reliant on save states that you just do very bad decisions that should normally get punished, but you can reload until they don't get punished. And so you can actually end up in a very, like I did with Fire Emblem as a kid, where like I just made a lot of really bad decisions.
Sure.
But I could just, as long as there was 99 and not 100 on the hit chance, I could get out of it eventually, right?
How come why do you like that better when it's swords and bows and axes?
Oh, tactics? No, I like tactics games a lot, actually. I just don't like gun tactics.
Is it just like a dislike of guns or something about the game?
No, I don't like the whole like Overwatch and like range and line of sight thing. The tactics, like the traditional Japanese tactics game, like Final Fantasy Tactics and Fire Emblem, just don't have most of those things.
Oh, they don't, even with shooting arrows?
Yeah, arrows you just kind of there's a little bit, but generally just like shoot them.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
All right,
that's. I would probably like it better as an adult. I think one of the problems with XCOM for me was also that it felt really slow. Like the actions felt slow because there were so many animations all the time. You can probably speed that up.
I think you
I
can
didn't
skip
really,
that stuff, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't really look too far into it, but I sort of just played like the first two battles. I was like, yeah, I'll come back to it later. And then
I did finish it, but it's one of those, like I said, because well, this is interesting that I did feel like my saving and loading was harmful because at the end of the day, I was like, I liked that experience, but I have the sense that I didn't do it right.
right, and you similarly feel like I just wasted a lot of time, right?
Yeah,
and that like I should have just accepted that failure at some point.
Yeah, although maybe not though, because if it led me to a bunch of game overs, I'm like, I don't know that I really want to play this that way.
Yeah,
so.
maybe.
Anyway,
on some level, that's sort of a core design. I don't know if I call it a flaw, but a decision, right? Where it's like you are targeting a certain type of player and you're giving them all the tools, but the tools may also harm others.
Well, and this is why they, I think, wisely have they do tell you, hey, this is the intended mode is to play with permadeath. And
right, that's true. Yeah.
And the harder difficulties require it. Like you don't have the option of saving and loading, but for easy and for normal, because if we say it's just easy, people are going to be mad. For normal, we let you still do that.
Right, exactly. And I'm glad they do that because, like, I don't like permanent death modes at all. But
yeah, I probably wouldn't even play it. Like Fire Emblem, when I pick that up, I usually I'm like, I guess you can save those, but only at the beginning of battles, right?
Yeah. So what you do is you just restart the battle if something goes wrong, which is sort of the intended way to play. Like you're sort of like mapping out the whole battle rather than one turn at a time. Yeah, you're intended. Well, I guess it depends on what you consider intended, but the way the vast majority of people play is that they try to play without any characters dying. So,
and Fire Emblem really backs that up with it being like actual characters and having like
Yeah.
an anime
Yes.
story and
Yeah.
relationships.
Yep.
XCOM, your characters are not characters; they're just
They're
stats.
randomly generated, right? So
Yeah, the stats. That's the progress you've made, not I've
right.
been romancing this guy or whatever.
Right. But yeah, in Fire Emblem, the way the vast majority of people play is that you if a character dies in a battle, just restart the battle and you like change something and you figure it out.
Okay.
And I think one last point I just want to mention psychologically is there's if players are allowed to do this, you sort of tap into I think some bad human nature things, which is things like just an obsession with perfection, right? Like if players are allowed to sort of reset until they get something perfect, a lot of them will fixate on it and kind of get stuck on it, right? Which is like I don't know. There's something where it's like, I guess I'm trying to think of an example in real life.
It reminds me
this
of
kind of thing
it reminds me of
happens.
spending an entire evening, quote unquote, playing Dungeons and Dragons, and everyone's just re-rolling their characters again and again,
Oh
and
yeah, that's
respecing and
that
shit.
also true. Yep.
Yeah.
I guess one thing in real life is sort of like this is like shopping, right? Like people who really like shopping don't like buying stuff and using it or wearing it. They sort of like browsing again and again and again until just to like see if there's something that's like slightly better
Yeah,
or like
making the
really
right
appeals
choice
to
or getting the right
Yeah.
deal or whatever.
yeah. And like people enjoy that. I think in real life people that do that enjoy it, right? But I think that's sort of a core human nature thing that people that don't enjoy can get sucked into in games if they're sort of sitting there re-rolling again and again.
Yeah,
You know, a good
even looking at Amazon reviews for 10
yep, exactly.
slightly different versions of the same shit,
Yeah, yeah,
where you're and trying to figure out what's the perfect decision here,
yep.
even though all that shit, yeah, even though it may be just very minor differences between the things you're choosing.
Yep, exactly. And then on a very similar vein, there's this idea that like as soon as something bad happens, a player's first instinct becomes, oh, I just reload. Like
Yeah.
right.
And so story bad things happening by force are like
Right.
feel weird,
Yeah, exactly.
like the Aerith
because,
dying
like,
example.
because we've gotten used to this idea of like, well, I can just fix all the problems by reloading or predicting that they're going to happen, right?
Yeah.
If you want, so as a designer, if you want the game to be like, hey, you need to deal with bad things happening that you can't control, that's where controlling the way the save system works comes in, right? It's like this bad thing is going to happen and you're going to have to deal with it. You cannot just try to avoid all bad things ever happening
Yeah.
because
yeah.
we think it'll be more fun. Okay. I think I'm ready to jump into the case study, but anything else here you want to mention?
I mean, can I talk a little about the death as a punishment to avoid?
Yeah, talk about whatever you want.
Okay, thank you. So one way that puts stakes on losing or dying, like I was talking about this the other day with Zelda, with the new Zelda, when Link dies...
Fortnite 2.
Fortnite 2, for the Nintendo Switch. It's got a worse draw distance, but it's really fun. When you get killed, there's no blood or anything. He gets whacked and he falls down and he goes, eh. And it says game over and it says continue. And that all happens in like 5 seconds. It's not, we're not lingering on his corpse getting looted or anything like that. But there are many games, particularly horror games, and I think this is a good thing for horror games. Like this makes sense for horror games, and I think a lot of game designers, a lot of games, horror for whatever reason, horror horns in on other game genres. I'm not quite sure why. If it's just like an obsession with realistic graphics, like as we get the ability to show someone's head exploding better, we must do that. And some people are like, well, or some people are like, well, we gotta stylize this so it's not absolutely horrifying. And there's other games where it's like, nope, it's just this. We're gonna make this body horror thing happen. So there's like the brutal and gory death animations, like Resident Evil or The Last of Us, where clearly this is part of the game. Like if you die, if you lose all your health or whatever, you're gonna see Ellie or Leon or whatever get their fucking face ripped off by by a monster, or famously your character gets their head ripped in two in Last of Us when you encounter a certain zombie. Just fun. And personally, I can't stand that stuff. Like that stuff really makes the game not fun for me. Where
Right.
I'm like, you're bringing in what I don't like about life, which is the sadness of
Which is getting your head
loss.
ripped off by zombies.
Yeah, and,
That happened. That happened to my neighbor on Tuesday. It's actually kind of
oh
crazy
well,
how it still
depends
happens.
where you live. Depends where you live.
Yeah.
Yeah, these days, 2023, who knows? And actually, in those games, if I do want to play those games, because I like The Last of Us beyond it being a horror game, I'm the guy that like throws off my headphones and closes my eyes and looks away.
Right.
Like I do that. I will do that every time if it means I don't have to see me get killed horribly the
Now,
15th time.
now, you can't. Can you not disable that in the options? Because I
Brutal
do
deaths.
recall that a lot of games, yeah, have an option where you can like disable gore basically in the options.
Sometimes you can disable gore. Sometimes that is a like literally they turn off the blood effects, but nothing
Yeah.
else.
I see.
But yeah, sometimes you can. If they had, dude, if they added that to Last of Us, I would be checking that box as soon as I can. But I don't think they have it.
Unlucky.
Yeah. And then there's games that are more not horror, more just action, like the latest Tomb Raider games have a real obsession with seeing Laura get hurt and killed in like, snuff video type ways. Where I didn't play the whole game because I was like, there's like a river sequence where you're swept down a river, and if you lose, every death animation is Laura getting impaled through the neck by a by a fucking tree branch, and her like struggling and screaming for many seconds before you restart. And I'm just like,
Unlucky.
it's just like, are there some sick fucks making these games?
Yes.
I think there are. Or like the classic Mario 64 example when we were new on 3D animations, when Mario dies of asphyxiation underwater, when he dies of drowning, it is a horrifying, scary animation of him like struggling for a few seconds and going limp. It's like it's weird shit. Anyway, so there's a lot of those things that give stakes to death even if you have saving and loading, right? And then there beyond brutal gory stuff, there's just the sad deaths, like the dark implications, like, if you're the hero that's going to save the world and you lost, so what happens next? The whole world fucking dies. We're going to show you that every time you lose so you can reload with confidence, I guess. Like the Uncharted series, when the main character Nate dies, you have like a friend with you. One of them is your future or current wife, depending on the game, or your adoptive father. And in the early games, when you died, they would linger on those characters saying shit like, "Oh my God, no, no!" Like their world is collapsing after you got shot by this mercenary for the 30th time.
Right.
And it's just, I think they toned that down in the later ones because they were like, "Wait a minute, this is not fun. This is just like really sad." And like when you lose in Chrono Trigger, it shows a whole ending about how the world is destroyed and you failed and you fucking failed. Ghost of Tsushima, the samurai game, when you lose all your life, you don't die right away. Your guy falls to the ground and crawls around. Like you can't do anything, you can't get out of it. You just get crawling around. So then your enemies, which are like the Mongol hordes, will like start laughing at you and kicking you around, and then eventually like mounting you and slitting your throat. But it's like a 10-second sequence that you can't skip. Where I'm like, who's? I mean, is this fun? Is this helping me enjoy the game? I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly agree with you. I would be interested to talk to someone who does enjoy it. I suspect that they
There's
wouldn't
probably
admit
like
it necessarily.
but there's like a horror element to this. Like, oh my god, what a horrible thing that's gonna happen.
Yeah.
That people like. Some people are into that shit.
Yeah, I mean, in general, this is how I feel about like movies as a concept, you know. So, I'm
Meaning,
certainly
like,
not.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, like there's a lot of gore in like crime dramas or action movies, right?
Yeah.
Like,
And if you like legitimately don't like that stuff, it doesn't. It's like, how is this entertainment, right?
yeah, and I think a lot of people are sort of immune to it in a way that's different from us.
Well, and it goes back to like, this isn't real. You know, it's a safe way to experience these fears and these horrors that
Yeah,
these
I mean,
people
I
get a charge
guess.
out of. I mean, they do. I don't get a charge out of them. Like,
Yeah.
I'm of the mind that the
Like-
real world is already sad enough. I don't want to spend time with media that is
Yeah.
just making me depressed.
I agree, but you actually watch movies, right? So, you're
Yeah, but they're usually not depressing.
yeah, that's true. So I have a memory actually. So there's this TV, I think it's an alien drama or maybe like a spy drama called Alias from like the
Yeah, I know
2000s.
that show. I didn't watch it. But she had a
as
lot of
a-
wigs, right?
I don't know because the only memory I have of it is like I was walking around my living room. My parents were like glued to the screen, like watching this torture scene where
Ugh.
someone was like screaming in pain for like 5 minutes.
Ugh.
And as a kid, I was just like, "What's wrong with you people?
Yeah,
Why
yeah.
are you watching this?" And they're sort of just like staring at it, and didn't really seem to affect them. I mean, my parents
Yeah.
are also like psychopaths, so like that's they might be special, but I do think just from personal experience and anecdotes like that, I think a lot of people are just not affected by it in the same way.
Yeah,
Yeah,
or
we
just like or you've seen it enough in media, and you know it just isn't real to them in the same way. But yeah, like yeah, I can't watch torture scenes either, or sexual assault scenes. I'm like, this is so far from entertainment.
Yeah.
I am going to remember this not fondly, like you remember that scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know, honestly, if you're into that shit, you know, fine, go find that stuff for yourself. But it is troubling to me that some of that stuff is in mainstream stuff. Like GTA 5 has a mission you can't skip where you literally are torturing somebody.
Well, all the GTA's have pretty messed up scenes actually. In GTA 3, GTA was I think San Andreas. There's literally a mission where you lock someone in a porta potty, kick them in a hole, and then dump concrete over the hole.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you're a bad guy.
Yeah, so
I mean, that's also the fun of it, right?
that is the
Like,
fun of it. But
it's be
I think there's a
fucking-
limit where, for me, and I think everyone's limit is a little different. But you know, to me, when you're like torturing someone or causing someone that kind of harm rather than just shooting them, you know,
yeah,
there's some level.
And I know, but people are also capable of being like, oh well, this is justified torture because they're they're a terrorist or whatever.
Yeah, I don't.
But
We
I don't.
disagree on this point, but I don't believe that's.
Yeah,
That's a thing.
yeah. I would never. I don't think. Well, okay. Yeah, you're right. We do disagree.
Yeah.
But, I think my range for that is very different than
Yeah.
maybe some Americans is, but or who
don't
I
think-
think is worthy of torture.
Yeah, I don't think it's just Americans. I think it's a universal thing, to be honest. But
Yeah, you're probably right.
in fact, America is probably one of the countries that is least tolerant of torture, actually,
What? But we torture
compared to
people.
compared to globally.
Yeah.
Yeah, but compared to like, I don't want to name any countries here, but compared to like the less developed parts of the world, I mean, it's
Yeah, but
quite
I
different.
get the impression in those situations the people have don't necessarily have to have have buy-in, but I guess I don't know.
yeah. I mean, well,
It's kind of what your government is doing, and you accept it or you don't.
it's the citizens that are like it's the prison guards that are doing the torture, right? So
Yeah,
I do
okay,
think there
okay.
is
Yeah,
that is true to some extent, but I think there's generally more acceptance among the general populace who sign up. Like, there's more people who are willing to sign up to be the prison guard, right, and be okay with it.
Yeah. Okay. And we can move on from this.
Where are we? Okay.
Oh,
So
sorry, I'm gonna tangent one more time.
okay.
I'm gonna do this one more time with Persona. I never see these because why would you? But in Persona 5, when you like run out of time on the dungeons, there are some incredibly dark endings that can happen. Whereas like one, you're fighting against like a mob boss or something, and if you don't win in time, like they like take one of the girls on your team as like a sex slave. It's horrifying. Yeah, anyway. All right, moving on.
Glad you got that out of your system. Very good.
It's just like some of these designers, like what the you guys are working some shit out. I don't know.
That's a whole new topic actually. That would be worth talking about, perhaps, about whose decision is to make these. But I would say it's probably not necessarily the designer from the game perspective. It's probably like
It's like
some
the director.
artistic, creative director, or someone from the art story team. But I would say movies are very similar, except you don't really get the freedom to say that, oh, it didn't actually happen.
What do you mean?
Like in a movie, if something happens on the screen, the vast majority of the time, unless you have some cop out,
Yeah, the characters just have to live with it.
Yeah, it actually happened in the story. So you can't really do the crazy bad. You can't have a bad ending in a movie, right? And I don't mean like a poorly made ending. I mean like a ending where like the worst possible things happen.
I mean, you can. It's not.
Well, you can't, but you can
not
only
the
have
most
one of
common.
them. Basically, you can only have one of them, right?
Oh,
you can
yes,
only
yes.
have one ending. So it's very
You
rare
can't
that
see
you'll
all
choose
of
to
them.
have it be, whereas in the game,
you don't have that game control.
it's actually very similar. In the game, you have the freedom to be like, oh, well, this doesn't actually happen. I'm just, it's a hypothetical. Hypothetically.
That didn't happen.
Yeah.
Hypothetically, Yukiko was made into a concubine.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the only thing I can think of is people who like write headcanon and fanfic about things to rewrite the endings to their favorite things, but that's like a whole other level.
Yeah, I think it is actually very similar, except, they choose to do the fucked up things instead of the nice, weird, romantic couple things.
There's both sides. Like some people want to do the fucked up ending too.
Okay, well, moving on. I want to do a detailed examination, a case study of, hopefully this won't take that long, a case study of a checkpoint versus a save anytime game, and see what happens if we switch them. Like what changes, right? When do we use one versus the other? And so for a checkpoint game, so I have not actually played Elden Ring. I've seen enough gameplay that I think I can talk about it, and I'm talking about it at a high level, so I think it's fine. But keep in mind that I didn't play this game or any FromSoft game actually.
I only have played Dark Souls 1.
Oh, I see. Okay, but anyway, I think pretty much in all the FromSoft games, they have a system where a checkpoint is also the checkpoint is a save point, is also like a fast travel point. It's sort of like a hub for the game. Yeah,
it's a fast travel point and like a spend your XP point.
Yep, exactly. And I think that design actually makes a lot of sense, fits really well into this game. So you can do a lot of things with this that you couldn't do otherwise. So one of the nice things is, like you mentioned, it's also the only place where you can spend your points, right? So one thing that happens in the other game that we'll talk about, the other example is Pokemon, is frequently you're in the middle of an adventure and you catch a new Pokemon and then you open up your menu and you just sit in your menu for like 5 to 10 minutes looking at your new Pokemon, seeing what they can seeing what you can teach them, looking at your items. You get distracted by this or that. and you're in the middle of what is probably supposed to be like a puzzle sequence, or like, you're in Victory Road and you're supposed to be like going through it and fighting trainers and doing battles. Instead, you take a 5 to 10 minute pause and you just do menus, and you come back and you're sort of disoriented.
Yep.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Having a checkpoint that also doubles as your menuing section, if the checkpoint is placed correctly, which I think they almost always are, in other words, they're placed in a safe area where you're not in the middle of anything, right? That I think helps the player a lot in.
Yeah, it's like a pacing tool, right? Like,
yes, exactly. Yes,
you get into, now's the downtime and now's the uptime, and we sort of design that flow for you.
Pacing
yeah,
is,
that's a really good point. Yeah, because it does. If you, in other cases like Pokemon, where or most games, I guess, where you kind of are
JRPGs.
menuing anywhere. What's that?
Yeah, like most JRPGs, right?
Yeah, yeah. And most games in general, I like, when you gain a level is a lot of the, or gain a new thing, a lot of the time is like, all right, now I menu dive until I feel good about it.
Yep. Exactly.
Which kind of sucks. Yeah, it is bad for pacing.
So having a checkpoint sort of naturally points the player in that direction, right? Obviously, in Dark Souls, you can still, if you want to, you can still menu whenever you want, right? Like you can move your inventory.
But there's,
around,
your options are way more limited.
Right.
I mean, you're probably
Exactly.
looking at your map or whatever.
Exactly. So I think that's great. And the other thing is that because the checkpoints are all placed in like fast travel locations, they're, safe locations, they're like memorable locations. But the safety part is important because it allows the player, when they spawn in, to know that, hey, this is a safe place, right?
Yeah.
I can take a breather here. I can look around. I can try to remember what's going on. I don't have to immediately worry about, oh, what's happening? I need to go here. I need to go there.
Getting ganked. Yeah, with fast travel, you because it also usually includes a loading. That's like when you may step away. I load the fast travel. I go to the bathroom. I get a sandwich.
Exactly.
And my guy's just standing there in the safe zone, right?
Yep. Exactly. And those are all things that work because they're designed well. I think that's sort of the key here, right? Because the checkpoints are placed in like conscious locations with like conscious environment and like intentionally designed to be safe and at hub locations or whatever, that's why it can work well. If they were sort of haphazardly placed, all these benefits that we described would kind of be gone.
And there are some games like that,
Yeah.
mostly older games where we hadn't quite figured that idea out.
And then and it's having checkpoints also, I think we mentioned before, makes it sort of like a level system, right? Sort of like a Mario or another platformer game where it's like, okay, here's your save point, and the next section you have to do all in one run, all in one go, right? And it's going to be hard, which it sort of ties into the idea that the game is supposed to be hard, right? Like you're expected to fail, but
Yes, failure is part of the game.
Right. And you're supposed to get better through practice, and you're meant to sort of do an obstacle course all in a row, right? Rather than doing things one at a time.
Yeah, and those are it's more or less like levels, yeah. Just maybe in open world directions or whatever.
Right. And again, that only works because it's designed well or intentionally, right? For that to work, obviously, so the downside is when you die, you lose your progress in the level, right? So for it to work, your levels have to be, again, intentionally designed such that the player is spending like a linear amount of time there, not forever, right?
Yeah, there's some sort of expected time it takes.
Right. All right, so let's consider the alternative, which is Pokemon. So Pokemon has a very different paradigm. I think the main thing to keep in mind, I think there's two main differences actually. One is it's not supposed to be hard.
No,
you're not.
No, indeed.
Right. Especially the newer games. You're just there for kids. You're not expected to fail. You're not really meant to fail at any point. Yeah. With that in mind, saving anywhere is just for quality of life because you can't really cheese. There's no need to cheese a fight the way you can in Dark Souls.
Yes. I mean,
Or
you
in Elden
can. Yeah, there's no like. Is there any advantage of walking around in the tall grass, reloading for the encounter?
Yeah,
No,
there
you
is.
just keep.
So
Oh,
there's
there is. Okay.
there is a part of where randomness is sort of part of the game. But what I mean is like there's nothing hard enough. So for example, in Dark Souls, or in Elden Ring or Dark Souls, if you could reload at any time, you might be like, oh, there's a difficult group of mobs coming up, but I just want to run through them. So I'm just going to save here, and then I'm just going to try to sprint through them by force because I don't want to deal
Yeah.
with it. And if I
Yep.
fail, I'm going to reload.
Yep.
With a checkpoint system, if you fail that, you die, and you're just like, okay, I guess I can't, or I guess I shouldn't just try to run past every mob and not play the game at all.
Yeah, and if you fuck up and you like get, you accidentally roll off a ledge and get fall
Yeah.
damage, it's like you just kind of got to roll with it. You think,
Yeah, exactly.
Pun intended.
And that's where having a save reload anywhere or in the fight would be like sort of cheesing the game in
Yeah, it gives me too many options. It's
Right.
like I'm not playing anymore. I'm just like
right.
I'm opening the death page on Choose Your Own Adventure and just going back.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Exactly.
Did you ever use those? Read those
did.
books? Yeah.
Yeah, I did. I remember a couple of them. I wasn't super into them, but they were okay.
I mean, they weren't good, but they were an interesting idea.
Yeah.
It's like but it was often like decisions that had no logic to them.
Yeah.
Like, if you choose the red potion, you go to page 54. If you choose the blue potion, you go to page 55.
Yep. Exactly.
Page 55, you have died. Oh, okay. Well, I guess red potion.
There we go. Yeah, you got red potioned. So what were we talking about? Oh, so the difference in Pokemon, I think, is that because the game is easy, you don't really lose much player experience by allowing them to save before fights. Just because it's like, what's the difference if you save or you don't? You're realistically not going to lose. Right?
Yeah, and it's also it goes to the convenience of those games, and the not completely, but the often mobile nature of those games. Like they're often on handheld games, and
Yep.
I think even more than a console game, it's likely that you're waiting for or about to do something else, so you got to be able to put this down at any time.
Exactly. And like you mentioned in Pokemon, a lot of systems are built for saving and reloading. So there's like a whole bunch of systems where it's like there's a very rare outcome that can happen, right? If you find a shiny Pokemon, you want to save right away. You don't want to risk losing that chance, right? Or if you're
Or IV
fighting
shit.
a legendary that you can only get one of, you want to save before and try to get a good one or whatever, right? If that's what you want to do.
Yep.
If you're trying to catch a certain Pokemon in an area, but you want a specific one, again, you want to save and like catch one. If it's not good, you can reload and then you don't lose your resources, right?
Yep.
Because
Yep.
these systems, these like random systems are in place, and they're not in like a sort of action level based game like Elden Ring. I think it makes sense why it's a save anywhere game, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that makes sense, and it's just like you as a designer, you kind of choose. You're choosing what kind of game you want to make with your save system.
And I think the thing to keep in mind is that designing a checkpoint is much more work than just letting the player save anywhere, right? You're building the save system, and then you're also building all of these checkpoints that have like intentionality behind them. So it's more work, and if you're gonna put in the work, it better be for a good reason, I guess.
Yep. You do avoid those edge cases though, but I guess you can always just say, if you save in a weird situation, sometimes it won't work, and let's be okay with that.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So what if we, just as a quick thought experiment, what if we swap these two types? What if in Elden Ring, you could save anywhere? I think we briefly talked about this, but I think it'd just be annoying for the player, right? It'd be like, oh, I just killed these 3 skeletons on the way, but I guess I should save because I don't want to fight those 3 skeletons again. They were kind of hard.
Yep.
And I didn't fall off the ledge. Now I should save. And it's sort of, again, it's like you mentioned, it's sort of a pacing thing, right? Where
it's bad pacing, and it's like it's changing what the challenge is,
exactly.
that I mean, hopefully we've probably both experienced this where, if you have save load, well, let's just say where if you don't have save load and you have checkpoints, the further you get from your checkpoint into the game, your last checkpoint, the more tense you might get, the more you might have the closing in your gut of like, oh shit, if I don't if I don't do this, I'm going to lose a lot. And it's just a totally different, like I am not someone who performs well under pressure, so I perform worse during those times, but it's more satisfying when I get through, where I'm like, oh man, I really accomplished something there because I felt it. I felt the emotions. I felt the hormones or whatever.
You get the tension, right? You get like, not, what's the word? Suspense in a way, right? In a way that
there's actual stakes.
Right.
Even though there aren't actual stakes.
Right. And like we mentioned, Pokemon fundamentally can't really build to that moment because it's easy, right? But what if you did? So what if you swapped Pokemon to use checkpoint system, assuming you sort of made the checkpoints like intentionally, right? And made it more reasonable. Well, it wouldn't work. I think it would sort of be against the point in the current game. You would have to make a new sort of idea about the game. And I think it would sound something like existing challenges. So are you familiar with like Nuzlocke?
That's like the super hard. That's like get one Pokemon. Just tell me. I won't explain the rules, but yeah, it is like it's limiting what Pokemon you can catch and use, and it's sort of enforcing permadeath through like the rules of the challenge. Right. Meaning, like, if you die, you have to start over?
No, if your Pokemon dies, you can't use them again. That's sort of the core idea.
So they have not just fainted.
Yeah.
They've
passed. They have. You just put them out to pasture after they faint once.
Están muertos.
As usual. So that's sort of what I think it would end up looking like if you wanted to follow sort of the Dark Souls model. There's probably other models that work, right? But
you could kind of hybrid it a little bit. Like, let's say gyms and tournaments, you can't save during. Like make there are gauntlets that have risk, but then a lot of the game is still the fun exploring and getting whatever Pokemon you want, kind of thing.
Yeah, the Elite Four, especially in early games, is like that. The whole point. The whole point. It is? Yeah, the whole point of part of the early games is that the door closes behind you when you start, so that if you can save inside, but you can't get out without losing. Like you can't retreat. You have to just lose.
Right. You only have what you brought in.
Right. So I think
they do that a little bit. All right.
I think something like that. It would be more things like that, right? Where the routes are more dangerous and can build up that tension and suspense that we were talking about, rather than sort of just being there to have fun. And yeah, you could do a hybrid, so you can have like open world areas and like sort of trial areas. But
yeah, we want kids. Usually, kids just want to succeed. They haven't.
I do think like as you said, at the end of the day, it is the game is for kids. It's sort of against what Nintendo envisions Pokemon to be, right? It's not.
Yeah. If we made it harder like that.
Yeah. Like the routes and the zones in Pokemon are not really meant to be a challenge, right? It's sort of just a map that's there, and you're kind of just meant to like look at it and like get something out of it, sort of like a real road, right? It's not really meant to be explored or like platformed the way maybe like an Elden Ring or like a platformer is. So in many ways, there's also no point. There's also one other problem, which is players are encouraged by the randomness part of it to stay in one place for a long time. And that's actually kind of a problem. So
you mean just re-rolling and re-rolling the Pokemon?
Yeah, so a player, like if you want to catch a specific Pokemon, but you want like a specific version of it, right? Like, hey, right now I want to get a Noctowl, but I want one with a particular... what do you call it? A particular nature or whatever, right? You're
tattoo
encouraged, like
type.
the game, yeah, the game encourages you to stay there for a long time. The problem, of course, with checkpoints is that they only really work if you sort of go through the level linearly, right? If you're
Right.
staying there for a variable amount of time, suddenly players are like, okay, well now I have to run back to the checkpoint again, and
Yep.
I have to run back
To
in
bank
here.
my stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So,
that's yeah, goes against the whole idea of what you're doing there.
right.
Huh. Okay.
Okay. What are the conclusions here? Uh,
Uh,
I think,
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, I think it's pretty. I think we've reached a pretty clear conclusion, which is,
I do have a little more time. I want you to talk about the Bethesda example you put here.
oh, the Bethesda example.
Yeah.
This is Bethesda is similar to Elden Ring or to the FromSoft games, like visually, right? But they allow you to quick save really a lot, and they don't have checkpoints. So while they're visually similar, the gameplay sort of illuminates why they're different.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Yeah.
the difference
The
is,
visuals in Bethesda games are worse, but
well,
that's the side of
I mean,
things.
as at a detailed level, right? But I
Yes.
mean at a high level, like
Yeah,
you're
what you're
still
looking
like
at.
a
Fighting
first or
monsters.
third person, like fighting things of human size. So the Bethesda games are much less encounter focused, right? There's not really bosses in spread out in the world in the Bethesda game,
Not really. There are like
right?
mega.
There's
They're
a
big
couple,
monsters, but
yeah,
they're not quite like bosses in that. I mean, some missions you have to kill
yeah.
a
No,
tough
there are
thing, but it's
some,
not quite the
yeah,
same as
right.
other games. Yeah.
And the places you go are generally, again, not at least, well, my experience is also from speedruns, which might be kind of scuffed, but they're generally not like a level the way that a FromSoft game is. If that makes sense. Like you sort
Yeah,
of,
they're more like they're locations in a world that you can explore, but they're not designed like levels in the same way
right,
Dark Souls is, where they, cut out extraneous shit and
yeah,
everything has some sort of purpose.
exactly. And so those two differences, I think, whichever one came first or second, those two differences kind of highlight why it works as a save anywhere game and why instead of checkpoints, right? Just
Yeah,
because,
where would you even put them?
yeah, exactly. Because the whole world is supposed to be like quote unquote alive and just working, and like things are interconnected. You're
Yeah,
not
you'd be
really
going back to like, I don't know, beating a specific dungeon or sleeping at an
right,
inn sort of thing.
right.
Like,
And it has fast travel, right? So you could say like the
yep.
fast travel points are the same, but again, those are like in towns and cities that are like alive, not really in specific
Yeah, it's
entrances
major
to the next
landmarks
dungeon.
have a fast travel.
Yeah. But I will say that Bethesda games probably shouldn't let you. Well, first of all, they shouldn't let you autosave, is the big one.
Why is that?
So if you imagine, so the thing that Bethesda games are very similar to is MMOs, right? In the sense that like the world is open
Yep.
and you're not really going through a challenge every. You're sort of doing quests, right, rather than a level. If that makes sense.
Yep.
In an MMO, you're auto saved all the time by necessity, right? Like you sort of everything you do kind of continues. Bethesda games probably shouldn't let you do that just because they're sort of broken. I think it's very easy to end up in a point where like something permanently soft locking happens, or you're in a death loop where you're like falling down, or you're stuck somewhere.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, those situations can definitely happen, especially with games that have an autosave but don't have like several
Yeah.
autosave slots.
Yeah.
Because yeah, you'll get stuck there. Yeah. Yeah, and Bethesda, I mean, yeah, I complain about them, how broken their shit is.
Very broken. It makes for good speedruns. That's sort of
It does. That's true. I just wish they would cut out like 30 to 50% of the content they're planning and just like focus on making the rest better.
yeah.
Because they just like they spread themselves so thin in those games.
It'd be interesting. to talk to someone in the industry about how things like that happen.
Sure.
I mean, I can obviously imagine how it happens, but like, I don't know. I would be very curious to hear some details, some like war stories about like how exactly, this like scoping up and scoping down all the time happened, and whether it was for a good reason, and whether
I mean, maybe,
it's just something
probably,
that just
maybe not. I would like to know that as well. I don't know any Bethesda folks, but I'm sure I might be able to find someone who knows about that.
it doesn't have to be Bethesda specifically. I think it happens like almost universally,
Bethesda's
yeah,
a big one though. I mean, if I were to guess, I'd say whoever's directing things, and Bethesda's not independent, right? They answer to a publisher. 2K,
I don't
is
know.
that it?
Maybe.
I think it's 2K, or at least it used to be. Oh no, they're their own publisher nowadays. Okay, great. What the fuck was I saying?
If you had to guess why they scale
Oh, if
up
I
and
had to
down so
guess,
much?
yes, they think their money is made based on the selling points of gigantic ass worlds with a huge amount of options, or quote unquote choice. And they're like, anything that'll add to that bullet point, it's okay. Don't worry too much about adding to our other bullet point, which is Bethesda games are always buggy. Because I guess
Right.
that's not what sells them.
Right.
They're still selling. I mean, people say Skyrim is like, some people say Skyrim's the best game of all time, which I find mind-boggling. But so some people like it.
They I think it's like one of the highest grossing games of all time, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I
So-
think and like mods have a lot to do with that. I think they
Yes.
fix where like on PC I can just fix all the shit that the developers didn't fix. But I still have all of these options. I can play the whole game as a vampire or werewolf or whatever. Like there's all
Yeah.
these little things in games in those games that are kind of wild, but when you actually play them, they just never are as fully fleshed out as I would
Yeah.
want. I'm
Which
like,
is
yeah, I
pretty
can
much the
do
whole
it.
thing.
Sorry, say again.
Which is pretty much the whole game, right? Like I found the combat and like I played Skyrim, or I tried to when I was very very bored, and I just found the combat to be like so unfun.
It's truly awful. Like it's so bad, and it's amazing. It must be the sheer scope and the sheer the feeling of all these options. Like you can join all these different cults and groups and stuff, and do some missions for them, but they're just never great. And so much of the game, I feel like I am tiptoeing around the bugs in order to survive and succeed.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, I kited this guy out of range and he despawned, or like shit like that.
Skyrim, I think with all of the highest, I think a lot of popularity as a metric for success, right? And I think in fact, this is the topic of our next episode about tiny games, or extremely viral games. I think a lot of the most popular or the highest revenue games, one common thread is that they appeal a lot to people outside of the normal demographic, whatever it is, right?
Yes.
And
yes.
I think Skyrim at the time it came out, especially, was sort of revolutionary in the idea that you could have like a huge open world, because I think nothing of that scale had really existed before outside of like MMOs.
Yeah, they famously have done that with Elder Scrolls since the beginning. I think maybe Daggerfall was the biggest, a huge step to just like massive open world. But a lot of it is just samey copy and paste shit. So
yeah, but I think Skyrim at the time it came out was like a good melding of like what people expected like a high quality game to look like, and what they had done before with the open world stuff. Because I think Oblivion was just like quite ugly, right? My experience.
Skyrim was the first time it got more or less good looking.
Yeah.
I mean, I would argue it's still kind of ugly, but
well, by today's standards for sure. But in 2010, 2011, it was.
I played it at launch and I was like, I don't know.
Okay.
They got a lot of dead-eyed characters in those games.
Yeah, that's fair.
But
anyway, I think
dragons look cool. So
that's true. And I think the story is generally well received, right? Like it's nothing groundbreaking, but I think it was captivating enough for most people that it was fun to explore the story from every
There's
angle.
some cool stuff in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's some cool stuff in it.
So I do think a lot of the success of Skyrim was how well it appealed to a vast audience rather than how well it did in any particular. Because again, when you're talking about a high revenue game, it just means you sold a lot of copies to people that would normally not buy a lot of them. This is the
Yeah,
I'm
or
creating
forgo
a-
something else they would buy.
I'm creating a new term. It's called the Donald Trump effect, right? In order to gain high popularity, the most important thing is to appeal to your existing audience, yes, but also to find a way to branch out and get a bunch of people that would normally not have been part of your audience at all.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the goal of every product growth thing, but
I guess
feel,
I guess you're the expert here. It's like some kind of marketing thing.
but I feel like there are levels of how much you commit to that. I guess that idea, in what you're doing, and I think when we talk about companies that are almost like primarily targeting a new audience, and if other gamers come along for that, that's gravy. Like when we talk about the mini games, is not small games, small game experience, apps and shit. There is such a impression, and it is a correct impression, that video games in general are huge time sinks, and some people want that, where it's like I want to escape into this reality for several hours, and to some people,
Years.
maybe you could say normal people, they say like, well, I'm not gonna. I got shit to do. I want to watch TV too. I don't want to. I want to play. I'll play 20 minutes of something over coffee in the morning, or when I'm waiting in line, and have a lot of fun with that. But I would never consider doing this nonstop for hours. And those games, I guess, attract a new audience, right?
I've been talking to what you say is really true. I've been talking. I've been doing like family stuff with my partner's extended family, and they, they're sort of exactly what you described. They're sort of like very casual players, and a lot of what they describe is like, man, we're adults now. We have jobs that are hard, right? Like,
there's always this explanation, like, oh, I'm too old for that. Like, it's just I'm too busy for that. I write it off entirely because of it.
And I think there's some layers there, because one is, okay, they're too busy, but also two is like they were never the type to really delve deep into games maybe the way you and I would. Right?
Yeah, they don't have the same pull that they don't have the same pull for them that they
like
do for
the appeal to them is the same as for all the people who casually watch TV to pass the time, right? It's not, there's people that watch TV to pass the time, and there's people that are really into TV, right?
Yeah.
Who like talk to other people about it and like read articles about the TV and so about the show.
Yeah, and I'm actively watching like every day, and have like a list of things to watch.
Yeah, exactly. And I think as you get older, it's very clear that like if you're not pulled to it in that way, you sort of lose it. And the games that are the games that they play are sort of the games that are very popular, right? So Skyrim certainly would have fallen into that category at the time, just because it was like, oh, this is a cool experience, and it's not really necessarily important that it's sort of rough around the edges and broken. They may not even notice those things.
And Skyrim reached kind of a runaway status in terms of like getting into some level of mainstream recognition. Yeah. And they did a bunch of like marketing around that too eventually. So it's like my brother, for example, he may buy one game a year and play it over Christmas break or whatever. And that's like what all he'll allow for himself. So he'll be like, okay, what's like the most popular game that I could even see myself playing? And
exactly. What is the game that's most like the movies that I watch is basically it, right?
Oh, that's, like the entertainment I already like. That's a way in. Yeah.
What I mean is like the most popular games are all like that, right? Like they're all sort of like adventure stories featuring, generally speaking, either a hot human girl, or a hot human guy as the main character.
Yes and no. Like, if there are those movie experiences, but I mean, some of the most popular shit is Fortnite and Minecraft. Like, doesn't have any of that shit.
Those are different. Those are different. Like your brother wouldn't play Minecraft, right?
You're talking about like an adult?
Yeah.
I suppose probably not. No.
Right.
He'd want to play, but also he's like a real movie guy, so it's a little changed.
It's
but,
a little different. But Fortnite and Minecraft are kids game. Like they're popular because all the children are playing them. Right.
Mm-hmm,
That's sort of their appeal. And for like the AAA titles like Skyrim, they're popular because, or they gross a lot because so many people that would normally not play games play them as, like you said, the one game that they play a year or a quarter. Right?
Yeah, it's an easy conversion to make. It's an easier conversion to make, right? Like it's like, oh, I get to live the movie. All right, great.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I should mention also hugely
Assassin's
popular,
Creed, same thing. Okay.
Also hugely popular sports games.
Yes.
Which is a kind of different, but it's also like not really. Like I want to be in the sports I love.
Yeah, it's also I think a lot of the appeal of sports. So we should talk about sports games at some point because I watch a lot of sports. I listen to podcasts breaking down strategy
that's
on
right,
sports.
You do.
And I've played sports
are you
games.
into? NBA?
American football, not the NBA. I think basketball sucks.
Okay. Oh, that's right. And you like baseball and NFL.
I do like baseball. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is not surprising if you listen to me. Of course, I like baseball. Obviously.
Because you like stats.
Yeah, baseball is the nerds game. It also has Asian people in it, which is
that's
the
nice.
appeal.
Ichigo.
Anyway, I think part of the appeal of sports games is that you already know them if you're a normie, right? You already know all the rules. You already know how to play. You already know what the strategy is generally supposed to be.
And you probably
Obviously,
have
there's
opinions on the plays.
Yeah,
and shit
exactly.
Like that.
You have favorite players and things like that. That's totally missing for especially for like an indie game, where it's just like, indie games are sort of like distilled game experiences, right? The story and the visuals are way less featured just for budget reasons, and sort of the appeal is the game itself.
And to your point that there is a level of learning then, right? That not
because
everyone, maybe most people don't want to do.
Exactly. It's like one of the complex board games, right? Like
I was just about to say that. Yeah, it's like you got to spend the first half hour or so learning it.
Yep.
Some people are like, fuck no, like let's just just play blackjack or poker or something. So I guess you got to learn poker, but it's just so much more popular.
Right. So
And
I think one of the things I think about a lot in life is like, as an indie company, you can't compete for revenue against Skyrim, right? You're not going to be like Bethesda can't even make Skyrim properly, right?
No, you have to target the right people,
right?
That will like your game, and hopefully you can get enough of them that it makes a profit over your indie budget.
Right. And the thing is, you have to target the right people, but you don't have the ability to expand your target to non-gamers, right? You have to, like, the only people that realistically are going to play your game, the vast majority of them are just going to be people that are already experienced in playing games, right?
Yeah, I mean, are there no examples of indie games that kind of started out with small following, but also were able to grow into something massive?
I think so.
I guess
like
Minecraft is that.
Terraria, Minecraft,
Terraria.
Stardew Valley are examples, but those are sort of outstanding examples, right?
Okay.
There's so many more indie games that come up.
Exceptional.
I think, exceptional. Sorry. I think another way to say it is that like it's really hard to expand your breadth of your reach, right? You can't really expand into new markets, basically, the way Call of Duty or Skyrim can. Or like Hogwarts, for example, the new Hogwarts Legacy game, that can expand into a new market, right? Of people that have never played the game. So it's really hard, I think, to get your number of sales to be competitive. And so one thing I think about a lot is how can these games change their monetization model to not have it be based on the number of people that buy their game, and instead have it based on something else. What else?
You mean, there's the option of you get your whales and you get them buying again and again.
Those are the two that currently exist, right? The two that currently are like more DLC or like costumes or whatever, microtransactions, which are
And
basically the same thing, right?
correct me if I'm wrong, as I understand it, like whales, like huge, small number of huge spenders prop up a lot of those
Yes,
small
they
games
do.
we're talking about.
Yep. Well, yes and no. I mean, they prop up the games with microtransactions, but
Yeah, but not like Angry Birds and stuff, I guess.
well, Angry Birds has microtransaction, I think. But what I mean is like for what about like a generic indie game on Steam that's $10,
Uh-huh.
right? That game is expected not to have any microtransactions based on like
Yep.
community expectations. But that game also can't expand its reach to compete with Skyrim unless it's really successful, right? Like
Yeah,
if you're just like a 70th percentile successful game that's like did well enough to survive, but you, right? How can you grow your studio, right? How can you add more features? Because you're already selling it for very cheap. That's sort of your selling point. But your revenue stream dries up very quickly because again, you're not expanding necessarily, right? Once you're past your anyway, that's a whole separate episode
Okay. Okay.
to talk about. Okay, I
So we can
do.
I was gonna say we can go to conclusions. Did you have
Yeah, no, that I think we covered our conclusions, right? Basically, the main conclusion is like, save any time. Just use save any time unless you want to design a specific experience around checkpoints. I think that's, and then the other option is unless you want to design a specific experience around an Iron Man mode, right? Or
I'd also say
no saving at all mode.
I'd also say don't half-ass that.
Yeah.
The
Yes.
the so Zelda Switch Zelda 1, what's it called? Breath of the Wild
Breath of the
has auto saving and manual save anywhere. But the auto saves only trigger when you do something fairly major, as I recall, like finish a temple or a shrine or find something like a heart container or whatever.
Right.
And in that game, if you were exploring for a while and didn't do anything major and forgot to manually save, you could lose a ton of progress.
Unlucky.
And it's like, why? What did that do for anybody? Like,
Right.
why is that an advantage? So now, Tears of the Kingdom, the new one, is their autosaving is way more aggressive. Like, it's just constantly autosaving.
Yeah.
If you die, you're going back to 5 steps. That's about it. That's about
Right.
it.
Right.
You lose maybe the items you spent trying to beat the fight, but yeah, I've just noticed that back then I was like always in the first game I was always like stressed about remembering to save because I had many times where I'd lose like an hour because of it and be like, what the fuck is the point of that? And now it's never happened. Like now I autosave or I manually save compulsively, but I really don't need to because it's like constantly autosaving like 10 different slots.
That's a very good point that we didn't talk about, which is like autosave is, if you're really going to allow a player to save anywhere, you really should just also do autosaves, right? Because manually saving sucks. Like people forget
it's
to
like
do it.
it's just an extra like thing you got to do, or like it's an extra skill. I mean, I've talked about it in adventure games like Quest for Glory, it being the primary mechanic in many cases.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you're not good at it, and if you forget to do it, that's like a key way to lose the game. Or to be like, I just fucked up. I forgot to save. It had nothing to do with anything else I did in the game.
That's a separate conclusion, actually, right? Autosave versus manually saving. If your game is built around some idea of like, hey, you need to save and reload here, like Pokemon, for example, right? Hey, you need to save here and reload because you're trying to get a certain outcome. And the game is like you're supposed to try to get a certain outcome, right? Or like he rewards you for doing that.
Yes.
Then manually saving is important. But for every other game, like for a Zelda game where it's just like you're just exploring, just auto save everywhere. Like what's the problem? Right?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, the worst you could be is like auto saving over, I threw a weapon away or something.
Yeah.
But
like in
just way
Zelda, you
different
can't
than
even
losing
like you don't even have enough resources to int away, right? Like
in the new ones you do. There's a lot
you
of
do?
resources.
Okay.
Yeah, you have weapons and shields and bows all have durability.
Okay, I see.
Everything breaks, and you got to pick up new shit all the time.
I see. I see.
And also, you have a pocket full of hundreds of like
Dollar bills?
dollar bills and just little items like flowers and things you can use to cook or attach to your arrows.
I
So
see.
yeah, you definitely have resources you go through.
Okay.
In the newer ones.
Fair enough.
So take
But-
that, Regal.
Okay. I do at some point, not today, want to talk about Savior as a superpower. I think you'll enjoy this.
I do
sort of
too.
thing.
Yeah, we want to talk as you said, saving loading as like what if you had that power?
Yeah.
What would you use it for? And I see in your example, it's like what if you only have one save slot? I think we should discuss 1 and maybe 3.
I think 3 is super broken, but yeah, okay, we can. No, okay, we can discuss it. Let's save it. Let's consider. Maybe we'll do this in the next episode. Maybe another like hour and a half episode.
Yeah,
and
let's
see
we can do a part 2.
happens.
I could talk
Okay.
about this for probably a long time.
Yeah, I think this will be fun, and we can bring in a couple other superpowers to see. Because so as a teaser, like I really dislike most. What if you could have X or Y superpower? Because I think they're very poorly defined. The example I usually use is flying. Flying
Well, like-
as a human.
Can I breathe up there? Like, am I hitting
Yes,
bugs?
exactly.
Is the
And
government
people are like, "Oh,
capturing
it's
me?"
so annoying. Why can't you just pretend you can fly?" But you know, a lot of what you can and can't do is affected by how it works, right? You
Yeah,
kind of
there-
have to
there-
know like what you can and can't do. So, for
kind of
example,
two different questions a little bit, but I agree
Yeah.
with you. Like, if we're really doing this, we got to think it through.
yeah. So
Like, and any superpower that gets you noticed,
yes,
like you become a target
It's a
of
big
assassins of
Yeah.
the government. Like, the government's
Yes.
gonna fucking capture you and
Yes.
torture you and figure out
Yes.
what makes you tick. Like,
flying.
there's a whole get.
Yeah, for that and all the other reasons, flying is like the worst superpower, right? You would never use it, right?
Yeah,
You
right.
just
Like, if
can't
you're
use
caught doing that, that's like the end of your life.
it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's a
Like-
there's a book I read some years ago called Replay, which is about the concept of when you reach the end of your life, you die and then wake up in your like 18-year-old body with all your knowledge and get to
Okay.
do it again. And there's also on top of that, like the loop gets shorter and shorter each time until they actually die. But aside from that, so in one replay, because the two people get a bunch of them. In one, they decide to go public, and they're like, "All right, we are going to stop the JFK assassination. We're going to make all these predictions to make the world a slightly better place because we lived through it and went back in time." But when they do that, they basically live the rest of their lives in a government prison, being like, with them trying to predict the moves of communist Russia and things like that. So,
Right.
which I always think of that example in when we talk about superpowers. Like, if I start zapping someone with red laser eyes, I'm not going to be incognito for long.
Right. So I think there's. I thought what you're going to say is, there's a butterfly effect where if you actually kill Hitler, the world actually becomes awful and ends, which I think is like the most lazy writer trope that has ever existed and does not make any
There's
sense.
some of that. There's like we stopped this, but we didn't really stop the core root of the thing. So it just
Right.
it popped up in another scenario.
That I think is realistic. That I think is very realistic. But
Like we stopped 9/11, but then they crashed into the Golden Gate Bridge instead.
because like if you stop Hitler, you might stop the Holocaust, but you don't stop anti-Semitism, right? That still exists even to this day. But anyway, it's
and would you stop the fascists or would
right.
I mean, once it's too late, I guess you'd stop it in the first place. Anyway, whatever. We can talk about that later.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll branch out to more superpowers. We'll see how it goes.
I think mind reading and selective invisibility are both options that I think can potentially actually be done.
I agree with invisibility. That's the one that's
You gotta be real careful with mind reading, though. I'm talking about like I would, play poker with people and just make the right choices versus like telling them things you couldn't possibly know and kind of outing yourself, you know?
Mind reading is a bit of a is a bit hard to define, just because are you reading what they know or are you reading what they're thinking at the moment, right?
Yes, and how is it controlled and all that? You know, what are the
Yeah.
limitations and what are the
So
do you hear things unbidden? That's
so
that'd
I
not be
think
fun.
I think what will happen is as we explore each individual superpower, we realize a lot of limitations, and then we can think about what is the most broken combination. Because if you combine saving and reloading with basically anything else, you become very broken.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, save load is a big one. I mean, even though he was, you haven't seen? Have you seen Groundhog's Day? This
No,
concept.
no.
It's a
I know
comedy in
I know
the
the
90s,
I've
80s.
read the plot of the movie on Wikipedia.
Yeah, it's basically Bill Murray is repeating the same day again and again, but the difference here is he doesn't choose the day. This is the one
Right.
where he's trapped in a small town he doesn't like, and he learns lessons about people and
Right.
all that shit. But he does get to do he does get to do crazy stuff, like he robs a bank and he goes on a police chase and all this stuff. And
So I think the difference is if you die, you actually respawn, right? In both the book you mentioned and in Groundhog Day.
I think so. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the difference with the save reload superpower that I think makes it really interesting is if you
can
die,
still
you
die.
die.
You don't get to reload
Yes.
then. You have to load
Right.
before the train hits you.
Right. So you have to change the way you play basically based on the idea that you can actually die, right? You will not live forever.
I think that's good. I think that's a good
Yeah.
requirement to make.
Okay.
it
Well,
realistic.
we'll
All right,
save that
stop
for next
right
time.
there. Yeah.
You need to go. So,
All right, let's save this episode and load.
okay, you're getting there?
Okay.
Almost.
Anyway, well, thanks everybody for listening to Open Betas. I'm Swimfan for Regal saying
Hello. Goodbye.
saying
Goodbye.
if you're gonna
Not
play a
hello.
game, do it on video. Good night, folks.
Yep, sure. Goodbye.